Last weekend, Postage Rejects got together in the Shed of War to play a Franco-Prussian War game using They Died for Glory rules. The game was the Battle of Froeschwiller, and the Prussian Third Army had invaded Alsace in northern France. Having defeated a French division at the Battle of Wissembourg on the 4th of August, the Germans lost contact with the retreating defenders. By the evening of the 5th, the French had been found in and around Froeschwiller, and the Crown Prince now ordered the elements of the Third Army to arrive and deploy in preparation for an expected battle on the 7th of August. Meanwhile, Marshal MacMahon, in charge of the French defenders' First Corps at Froeshwiller, was also laying preparations. He sent orders to General Vallet, in charge of the Fifth Corps, to march immediately to add to the defence. Like the Crown Prince, MacMahon anticipated the battle would be on the 7th of August. However, in the early morning of the 6th of August, forward Prussian elements skirmishing around Worth found themselves in a fight and eventually gained control of Worth. Responding to the sound of battle, Bavarian brigades on the German left flank engaged in increasing numbers. As more German units marched to the sound of the guns, the situation escalated throughout the morning. French defenders had so far acquitted themselves well. However, by midday, the Germans had deployed a significant artillery presence. The Crown Prince, now realising it was too late and dangerous to disengage from the encounter, decided to continue to rush the rest of the Third Army into the fray as best as could be done. The scenario picks up at the battle at 12 noon, with the engagement well underway and units closely engaged. The French must keep Froeschwiller and the road west to Richthofen open for the Fifth Corps to arrive, or to permit a retreat. Steve, Dan and Ray took control of the Bavarians and Prussians, with myself, Mike Sace and Stuart commanding the French defenders. The French occupied a row of hills with some towns acting as strong points. The Bavarians already had several deep columns shielded by skirmish lines ready to move forwards and very close to our lines. We anticipated the arrival of more German regiments, but in what number and from what direction was unknown when the game started. However, the French could see that there were two large batteries of 6-pounder field guns already set up and deployed on the heights across from us. I was commanding the French left flank, looking at a large body of Bavarians facing my rather thin line. I also had control of some of the centre, including some dug-in troops and those occupying some buildings of town, although at this point it was unclear how difficult, if at all, it would be for the Prussians to prise us out of our positions. The German guns promptly opened fire and quickly started targeting our guns, eliminating nearly all of them by the end of the first turn. The initial Prussian assault was forced back through gunfire, but behind them fresh columns appeared as more and more Prussian and Bavarian troops marched to the sound of the guns. The French were able to put up a withering fire with their chassepot rifles, and for some of the columns approaching that was enough to force them either prone or make them foul their morale and fall back. At first it seems that the Bavarians and Prussians would struggle to make headway in this hurricane of lead, and for the first couple of turns, aside from the loss of the guns, most of the French infantry regiments were unharmed. The game progressed and the Prussian artillery got its range right and casualties started to mount on the French side. Simultaneously, the first Prussian and Bavarian reinforcements began to arrive. Shielded by woods, some came on halfway across the table, appearing as if out of nowhere. In some cases, it would still take them 1 or 2 turns movement to cross the distance between them and the French, but by this point there were so many targets the French to fire at that they stood little chance of holding back this tide of Germanic infantry. The first part of the French right flank controlled by Mick was forced back with heavy casualties. Then the Bavarians on their left flank did the same with my thin line of French defenders. Myself and the other French commanders had used additional regiments and created a fallback line, but of course they lacked the benefit of being able to fire at long range by this point, as the Germans had closed most of the gap. The Prussian columns were massed and in huge numbers, and we watched a series of coordinated attacks taking place in the centre. Despite facing French troops who were dug in and others in command of buildings, the overwhelming weight of the attack produced inevitable results. The second line of French defenders were able to deal some damage to the Germans at various points along the line, but by mid-afternoon it seemed that no amount of casualties was going to stop this Prussian wave from washing away the French entirely. With French casualties mounting and their positions untenable, our flanks started to pull back towards our line of retreat. This apparently is historically accurate, the French perimeter being squeezed from all sides by overwhelming numbers. On the left flank I had already abandoned my initial positions and pulled back to a second line anchored on Froeshwiller, but it was a forlorn position and we knew it. The day was pressing on and Richard decided to end the game there, declaring it a German victory. There were still 3 turns left in the scenario, but we wouldn't have held our line of retreat at the end of the second turn, let alone a third. The French commanders had put up as tough a fight as we could and had caused a lot of German casualties, but ultimately we were waiting for reserves which were never going to arrive. Despite the defeat, this was an absolutely brilliant game that had all of us thinking and fighting hard for the whole of the day, and I for one am looking forward to another game in this period with these rules. I'm currently working on a review of the rules that should be out by Friday. So please keep an eye out for that, because I really do think that They Died for Glory are a cracking set of rules, simple to play but keep the players engaged at all points during the turn and keep everyone thinking really hard and trying to decide how they're going to use their limited number of action points to best effect. So that video will be out later in the week. In the meantime, I strongly recommend seeking out Ray and Richard's reviews of the games on their blogs, and I'll put links to that in the description box below.